In the heart of a bustling little town called Oakhaven, a place that prided itself on cheer and noise, lived a young girl named Ilara. She was a silent island in a sea of laughter. From her window, she'd watch the other kids in the town square. Their games were a flurry of rules she couldn't grasp, their conversations a river too fast to step into. They all had this easy confidence, a sense of belonging that felt as foreign to Ilara as the surface of the moon. She wasn't unhappy, not really. She was just apart. A single quiet note in a loud, boisterous song. Her only comfort was the sprawling ancient forest that bordered the town, the Whisperwood. The townsfolk saw it as a place of shadows, a dark border to their bright, orderly lives. But for Ilara, it was a sanctuary. The second she stepped under the green canopy, the noise of Oakhaven faded away, replaced by a gentle, humming peace. The rustling leaves, the soft crunch of twigs, the distant call of a bird. This was a language she understood, a language that didn't demand an answer or judge her silence. It simply was. One afternoon, after a clumsy attempt to join a game of tag left her feeling more invisible than ever, she fled to the Whisperwood. She walked deeper than usual, past the sun-dappled glades and into the forest's primeval heart, where the trees were gnarled and ancient. She found a colossal oak, its trunk so wide it'd take 4 kids holding hands to circle it. Its bark was a rugged map of wrinkles, telling a story of centuries. A wave of quiet despair washed over her, and Ilara leaned against the rough bark. She closed her eyes, wishing with all her heart she could just melt into the tree and become part of this quiet, steady world. And in that moment of perfect stillness, something happened. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a bird. It was a feeling that bloomed directly in her mind, a whisper made of sunlight and root-deep stillness. It wasn't a sound, but a sudden, clear impression of a single word. Her name, Ilara. Her eyes snapped open. The forest was exactly as it had been. No one was there, but she had felt it. A greeting, a name. And it had come from the ancient, silent giant at her back. Section 1. The First Conversations. For a long moment, Ilara didn't move. She stood frozen, her hand hovering just over the coarse bark of the ancient oak. Was she imagining it? She pressed her palm flat against the tree. The bark was warm, humming with a slow, deep vibration, like a giant heart beating once a minute. She took a shaky breath, feeling a little foolish, and whispered, "Hello." There was no sound, but a feeling washed over her, a sense of calm amusement. It was followed by a cascade of impressions in her mind's eye, a shower of acorns, a blanket of snow, the memory of lightning, the slow crawl of 100 summers. It wasn't a conversation in words, it was an exchange of pure sensation. The oak wasn't telling her its story, it was sharing its existence. Over the next few days, Ilara kept returning to the Whisperwood, no longer just for refuge, but for connection. She moved from tree to tree and discovered that each had its own distinct energy. The willows by the creek murmured with a flowing sorrow, sharing sensations of the water slipping through their roots. The tall, silver-barked birches felt bright and youthful, their presence like flickering sunlight through their leaves. The ancient oak, which she began to call the Elder, became her greatest teacher. By touching the bark and focusing her mind, the impressions became clearer. The oak taught her the first law of the forest. Everything is connected. It wasn't a spoken lesson, but a demonstrated one. The Elder sent a pulse of awareness down into its roots, and Ilara's mind followed it into the cool, dark earth. There, a breathtaking secret was revealed, a vast, intricate network of mycelial threads connected the roots of every tree, every shrub, every wildflower. It was a wood-wide web, humming with a constant, silent exchange of information. She could sense the elder passing nutrients through this network to a struggling young sapling far away. She felt a wave of alarm, a purely chemical signal of distress, spread from a cluster of pines on the forest's edge, a warning about a beetle infestation that rippled from tree to tree. The forest wasn't just a collection of individual plants, it was a single, sprawling, interconnected organism. Elara began to spend every spare moment learning its secret language. She learned that the rustle of leaves was more than just wind. It was a complex signal about changing weather. She learned that the scent of pine was more than a pleasant smell. It was a chemical defense. She learned to sense the slow, patient existence of the trees, their awareness stretching back, long before Oakhaven was even a thought. This new connection filled a void in her she hadn't known how to name. She was no longer an outsider. She was part of something vast and ancient. Her own silence, once a source of shame, was now her greatest strength. It was the key that had unlocked the forest's song. She wasn't Elara the quiet girl anymore. She was Elara, the one who could listen. Section 2. The Rising Shadow. Her joy, however, was soon shadowed by a growing unease. As she grew more attuned to the forest, she began to perceive a new signal rippling through the network. It was a subtle discord at first, a low hum of distress beneath the usual serene melody. It started at the edge of the Whisperwood, near the town, and was slowly creeping inward. One day, while sitting with the elder oak, she felt a sharp spike of that distress. It was so sudden and intense that she gasped, pulling her hand back from the bark as if burned. The elder's presence filled her mind, not with images this time, but with a raw, primal signal of dread. It directed her attention toward the source. Hesitantly, Elara followed the feeling. It led her to a part of the forest where a stream trickled out toward the newer houses. And there she saw it. A patch of trees, mostly young aspens and maples, looked sick. Their leaves were limp and tinged with an oily brown. A grayish blight was climbing their trunks. The ground around them was dark and sterile. The water in the stream, which should have been clear, had an unnatural sheen on its surface. She reached out and touched the bark of a dying maple. The sensation that met her was a choked, silent scream of biological agony. It was a tree being poisoned from the roots up, its connection to the great network severed. Panicked, Elara raced back to the elder oak. "What is it?" she whispered, pressing her forehead against its ancient bark. "What's happening?" The elder's response was heavy, burdened. It sent her a powerful impression. Not a memory of the past, but a horrifying glimpse of a possible future. She sensed the blight spreading, the decay consuming tree after tree, moving relentlessly toward the forest's heart. She saw the vibrant green of the Whisperwood turning to a sickly, silent brown. The living network flickered and died, leaving a dead zone of silence. Then the vision expanded. She saw the blight seeping into the town's farmlands, the crops withering. The threat wasn't just to the forest, it was a creeping death that would eventually consume Oakhaven itself. A new feeling was transmitted from the elder then, one she hadn't felt before: urgency and something else, a sense of hope directed at her. The forest had been trying to send out its warning, but only she could understand. Filled with a desperate purpose, Elara ran from the forest. She didn't stop until she reached the town hall, where her father worked as a clerk. "Dad," she panted, "something's wrong in the forest. The trees are sick. They're dying." Her father looked up, startled. He smiled patiently. "Whoa, slow down, Ilara. What's all this about?" She tried to explain. The blight, the poison in the stream, the silent screams of the trees. But the words felt clumsy. How could she explain a language that had no sound? Her father listened, his expression shifting from concern to gentle dismissal. "Ilara," he said softly, ruffling her hair. "It's probably just a dry patch. Trees get sick sometimes. You have a wonderful imagination, but you can't let it run away with you." She tried again, her voice rising with frustration. "No, it's real. The elder oak showed me." At that, his face settled. "That's enough, sweetheart. The world is a lot less complicated than you think." She looked around the busy office. A few people were watching, smiling faintly. To them, she was just a strange girl with an overactive imagination. The old loneliness washed over her, heavier than ever. She was the sole ambassador of a dying kingdom, and no one would believe her.
Section 3.
The courage of a listener. Days turned into a week. Ilara watched in silent agony as the blight continued its slow march into the forest. Each day, the zone of silence grew. The pain from the network was a constant, low-grade thrum of a wound that wouldn't heal. Her attempts to warn others were useless. The mayor patted her on the head. Her peers laughed at her for worrying about weeds. Despair began to set in. What could she possibly do? Defeated, she returned to the elder oak, her only confidant. She slumped at its base, tears of frustration tracing paths through the dirt on her cheeks. "I tried," she whispered. "They won't listen, they can't hear you, and they won't hear me. What do I do?" The elder's presence enveloped her, not with doom, but with a feeling of profound, unwavering resilience. It didn't give her an answer, but as she connected with it, a question bloomed in her own mind. What does the forest do when it is wounded? Ilara focused, sifting through everything the forest had shared with her. She remembered the impressions from the pine trees, secreting a thick sap to seal a wound. She recalled the willows, whose roots could filter impurities from water. And she remembered the most important lesson of all. When one part of the forest is in danger, the healthy parts share their strength. They didn't fight with anger, they fought with wisdom, chemistry, and the slow, powerful, interconnected magic of life. They healed. An idea began to form. She couldn't make the adults listen, but maybe she didn't have to. Maybe she could be the hands of the forest. She went back to the elder. "Show me," she asked. "Show me what you need." This time, the information that flowed from the tree was different. It was practical. It was an instinctual recipe. Drawing on the collective knowledge of the entire forest, the elder guided her mind to three things. First, the thick sap from the heart of the pine groves, rich in protective resins. Second, the pale moss that grew only on the north side of the granite boulders, known for its ability to absorb toxins. And third, water from a hidden underground spring whose purity the elder's deepest roots could sense. The plan was audacious, but it was a plan. A spark of hope ignited within her. She wouldn't be a helpless messenger, she would be a healer. For the next 2 days, Ilara worked with a fierce determination. She collected the golden pine sap in a bucket. She carefully scraped the pale moss from the cool granite rocks. Finding the spring was the hardest part. The elder guided her with feelings, a sense of warmer and colder, until she found a damp depression hidden beneath ferns. She dug with her bare hands for hours until at last clear water began to seep into the hole. As dusk fell on the third day, the air grew heavy. A strange coppery tinge colored the clouds. The signal of pain from the forest intensified into a piercing cry. The blight was accelerating. It was now or never. Dragging the heavy bucket, Elara made her way to the border of the afflicted zone. The grey decay had spread. Taking a deep breath, she walked to the first sick tree. Dipping her hands into the poultice, she began to smear it onto the blighted bark, working it into the cracks and sores from the base up. She worked tirelessly, moving from tree to tree, a solitary figure against the growing darkness. She was an extension of the forest's will. She could feel a faint stirring of encouragement from the healthy trees behind her, a wave of support sent through the network to their unlikely champion. As she was tending to the last tree by the stream, a voice called out, "Elara, what in the world are you doing?" It was her father, holding a lantern, his face etched with worry. Behind him stood the mayor and a few other townsfolk. They stared, bewildered, at the girl covered in mud and green paste, tending to dead-looking trees. "I'm helping them," she said, her voice clear and steady. "This is the only way." Her father started to object, but the mayor held up a hand, his gaze fixed on the stream. He knelt, dipping a finger in the water. He looked at the oily film on his skin, then at the dead patch of earth, then back at the trees Elara had coated. For the first time, he wasn't looking at a little girl with an overactive imagination. He was looking at evidence. Just then, a low rumble echoed through the forest. The clouds opened up, and a sudden torrential rain began to fall. But it wasn't normal rain. It was a foul, acidic downpour that stung their skin. The blight was in the air itself. The townsfolk cried out, but Elara felt a surge of triumph from the forest behind her. The poultice began to react. The pine resin formed a protective barrier, shielding the bark. The moss absorbed the toxins. The microbes from the spring water, activated by the moisture, began to wage a microscopic war on the blight. Where the rain hit the treated trees, it ran off harmlessly, but where it hit the untreated ground, the grass withered. The adults watched, stunned. They saw the clear line between the dead ground and the trees Elara had protected. They finally understood. The threat was real, and this quiet girl had faced it alone. Working together, guided by a humbled mayor and a proud father, the townsfolk sheltered under the trees Elara had saved. When the toxic rain stopped, an investigation was launched. It quickly traced the blight to a leak from old barrels of industrial waste buried carelessly decades ago. The source of the poison was finally. Slowly, miraculously, the forest began to heal. The trees Elara had treated began to sprout new green leaves. The zone of silence receded, and the healthy humming life of the whisperwood returned. Elara was no longer an outcast. She was a hero. The kids who once ignored her now asked for stories of the trees. The adults, including her father, now listened with respect. She had found her voice, not by shouting, but by listening. Final image. Weeks later, Elara stood once more at the base of the elder oak. The forest was a symphony of green and gold. The air was clean, the network hummed with a deep, peaceful contentment. She wasn't hiding in the forest shadows anymore. She was standing in its heart, a part of it. She leaned against the ancient bark, closing her eyes. She felt the steady, powerful presence of the elder and the calm, life-affirming hum of 1,000 other trees, all joined together. A new feeling bloomed in her chest, a quiet confidence as deep and strong as the roots of the tree at her back. She was Elara, and she was home.